Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla, and for today's video, I'm sharing my thoughts on the Money Guy's financial order of operations. The financial order of operations is also known as FOO or FOO, and this was created by the Money Guy or Brian Preston. He also has a co-host, or the guy who works with him. His name is Bo. If you've never heard of the Money Guy, they are an awesome podcast, such great information. So you can actually listen to the podcast on Spotify or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, but they also have a YouTube channel. No matter which one you choose to listen to or watch, they have just very good information. The both of them are definitely very educated in finances, and the way that they approach finances is very simple. It's to the point. I would say that they're pretty unbiased and everything. I love what they have to put out there. And also their podcasts, they never have ads. Obviously on YouTube there's going to be ads, but that's just because it's YouTube. So similar to the video on sharing my thoughts of Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps, I'm going to do the same thing in this video, but I'm not going to be watching a video. It's just going to be on my phone reading a blog post that breaks down the 9 steps in the financial order of operations. I will have this link down below because this article is actually filled with a ton of information that I'm not going to have time to get through in this video. And I will say that the FOO, in my opinion, is one of the best, like the order of investing your money or where to put your money. I think this is one of the best paths to follow. There are a couple of things though that the way I approach my finances, I would tweak a little bit, but for the most part, if you follow this, to me, this is so much better than anything else I've seen. So, and actually before I go through their 9 steps, they first mention the 5 ground rules for the financial order of operations, and I absolutely love these, so I kind of wanted to mention them and talk through them a little bit. So ground rule number 1, generosity is not a single step in the financial order of operations, and what they mean by that is it's a fundamental step 0. There are plenty of ways to be generous, even if you can't give much money, like donating your talent, knowledge, and time. We all should be doing our part to make this amazing planet a better place. I love that so much. I think a lot of people forget that you don't need money to be generous. Even if it's just, volunteering your time or doing something nice for people, giving even just a compliment, those things count as generosity as well. Ground rule number 2, the goal is to invest 25% of your gross income. If it were easy, everyone would do it. This is a much better figure compared to other steps to follow. So 25% is a good percentage to aim for. Even better, in my opinion, if you can do more. But yeah, 25% of your gross income can be quite a lot of money. It is something that would take some time to get to. But they say it's probably not any fun either unless you are a true financial mutant. And they often say this in their videos and on their podcasts, being a financial mutant is just basically you are not the normal person when it comes to finances. You are going basically above and beyond and being more financially savvy. So they say that a lot. You'll hear it very often. Ground rule number 3, debt is a 4-letter word. Hearing the word debt should make the hair on your arm stand up. Always be cautious with your use of debt and learn how to use it in a safe and responsible manner by following our Money Guide debt rules. I'm not going to go into their debt rules. That's a whole different topic. But yeah, I'm glad they call that out. I also like that they're saying to use debt responsibly, be careful with it, but they also understand that there are some people who use debt as leverage. It's not something that I do, I know for Robert Kiyosaki, for example, he has tons of debt, but he uses that to make money, apparently, So there's people out there who can make money by taking out debt, but I love that they kind of give that option. As long as you're going to be responsible with it, be aware of what you're getting into instead of just no debt, no credit card, all of it is bad. Ground rule number 4, liking what you do makes everything a lot easier. Not everyone loves their job, and that's okay. However, if you do have a passion for what you do, life will be much easier. Many of us spend more time at work than we do with our family. The people you work with and the environment you work in is extremely important. Working in a career that provides you purpose will make time fly. I love this so much. I quit my job back in May of 2024, and life has just been so much better because I'm doing things that actually I like to do, and it's just it's a world of a difference. So I agree with this completely. And I know that that's something that I'm very privileged to say that I'm so grateful for my situation. But it's something that I worked toward. I knew I wasn't happy doing the jobs that I was doing. And so I was I'm going to make this happen. Yeah, 100% agree with that. Ground rule number 5, you only get one life. Don't lose the perspective on the importance of enjoying each stage of life. There's a line you can cross that takes you from being awesome with your money to being a miserable miser. I feel like they kind of say these things as an opposition to what Dave Ramsey preaches. They have a video where they compare Dave Ramsey's baby steps to their financial order of operations. But yeah, I think it's interesting that they call this out because as Dave Ramsey says, and I talked about this in that video where I gave my thoughts on that, but it's like you can't enjoy life basically while you're paying down debt. But y'all know my approach. I think we should still enjoy life even if we're tackling debt, obviously within means, and don't go crazy, but it's okay to travel. It's okay to get food out while you're on your whatever financial journey. So love that they called that out. So let's go through the 9 steps. Step number 1, deductibles are covered. The first step is to cover your insurance deductibles. When something goes wrong in life, having your deductible covered is essential to keeping your financial life out of the ditch. You likely have deductibles for your health insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, and more. So then they follow up with, do I need to save all of my deductibles or just one? You only need to save enough to cover your highest insurance deductible. I think this is a great strategy to follow. So step number 1 is basically an emergency fund. And I do like this step a lot, but there's a couple, well, just really one flaw with this, which I'll talk about in a bit. But basically by you saving your highest, the largest deductible that you have, like let's say your medical deductible was like $2,000, right? But let's say something came up with your car where you had to use your insurance, but your car insurance deductible is $1,000. So if something came up with your car, but you had saved $2,000 because you saved your highest deductible amount, which was the medical insurance, you'd still be good. So that's why they say use that largest deductible, and I think that is a great strategy. I think one thing that they should call out here, and I was reading through to make sure that they didn't, is what if all of your deductibles are pretty low? I know that when I was working my 9 to 5, for example, my deductibles were sometimes $0 for my health insurance, for example, or like $500, super low, right? And then same with my car insurance. Typically, it's nothing too crazy. I think when I was working full time, my car insurance deductible was like $1,000 or something, maybe even $500. So if I were to follow these steps, I would only be saving $500 or $1,000, and that's not the only thing that could happen. You know, like yes, if something were to come up, it probably is something with your car, something medical. But what if you lost your job? And that's where an emergency fund would come in. But if you only saved up enough to cover your deductibles and they were very low, you kind of would be out of luck. So I do wish they called that out. Like if you have a much lower deductible, then save X amount of expenses or something like that. Like that's what I would think. Step number 2, employer match. Getting your employer match is important. So important, in fact, that we prioritize it in the FOO before high interest debt. High interest credit card debt may have interest rates of 20% or a little bit more, but an employer match can have a rate of return of 50% or 100%. Yeah, this is definitely something I do agree with. Like if you have a employer match available to you, your 401k, your TSP, your 403b, whatever it may be, I do think taking advantage of it is very important because it is part of your compensation and free money. They do call out something in this article that I always like to mention when talking about this, which is the match being guaranteed, and it is not always guaranteed. So typically you should know this when you're going into a job. If they mention anything about vesting, actually I would always ask about this. Like this is when I was applying to jobs back then, I would always ask, like, is that vested immediately? How does that work? Is there a percentage? And usually that should be outlined pretty clearly. So if you're working at a job and you contribute to your 401k or whichever retirement plan, and then you're also getting a match, you definitely get your contributions. Whatever you contribute, even if you leave the company, that money is yours. However, there's something called a vesting period or vesting schedule where, you know, sometimes employers will say like it's not vested until after a year. So sure, they're going to be matching your contributions for that first year, the 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is. But if you were to leave before that vesting schedule, then the match is not guaranteed. So just be careful with that, and something to consider depending on the job that you take. And I touched on this when I shared my thoughts on Dave Ramsey's baby steps, but I personally would put this as step one too. So if you can, like as long as you're able to pay your bills, you're not missing important things like, you know, paying the water bill, paying the electric bill, you're not going into the negatives each month, you should be able to afford that company match. So I would do that even before establishing your emergency fund. If you have money left over at the end of the month, then I would say that you are fine to contribute to your employer plan up to the match and do that before your emergency fund or paying off debt, especially if you choose to do traditional contributions where it lowers your tax burden. You're really not going to feel too much of that money loss. So you're going to be, yes, using more money to be contributing to retirement, but because if you do traditional, it will lower your tax burden, you're not going to feel that too much in your paychecks. And that's why I think most people should take advantage of that sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think second step is pretty good. Step 3, high interest debt. Paying off all of your high interest debt will allow you to invest more for your future. They put in here, does my mortgage count as high interest debt? They basically say not really, so you don't have to worry about that. They have in here, which high interest debt do I pay off first? Mathematically, it makes the most sense to pay off your debt with the highest interest rate first, then prioritizing debts with lower and lower interest rates until they are paid off. This is something I talked about in my debt snowball versus debt avalanche video. That was my approach to paying off debt because I like the math side of finances. Like I wanted to save more, I wanted it to go faster, but many people prefer the snowball and that's okay. And they mentioned that in here. However, if getting rid of debts completely is a big motivating factor for you, paying off your smallest debt first may help keep you going and pay off your debt sooner. So yeah, picking what's best for you. I love that they outline that. And how do I know I've completed paying off my high interest debt? High interest debt includes consumer debt such as credit cards, car loans, outside of our 23/8 rule, and student loans depending on your age and the interest rate. I would say a good rule of thumb is really like anything above 8%. I know that mortgages are creeping up to the 8% for some people, but yeah, like they kind of talked about in this article, a mortgage is at least something that is somewhat of an asset, you know, and you're probably gaining equity in it on a month-to-month basis. So that is one that you can kind of wait until later. But yeah, anything else that's above 8%, I would just go ahead and prioritize that. But yes, I think that's a great next step. So moving on to step number 4, which is an emergency fund. It's vital to staying on track financially and paying for unexpected emergency expenses. And then they put in here, is my deductibles covered fund included in my emergency fund? And they say, yes, your deductible covered fund becomes part of your emergency fund. They are not separate funds, so it should give you a head start on your emergency fund. I already touched on this in the first step, but I think this is a fine step to follow, like even having the deductibles first and then this later on is fine for some people. I do wish they would have called out though, if you are somebody who has low deductibles, save something, save, 1, 2, 3 months of expenses in case of job loss, something that deductibles would not cover, They also answer a couple of questions on here. What account should my emergency fund be in? They mention high yield savings account. Love that. They also even mention if you only have one income in your household or are in a very specialized field where it may take longer to find a new job, you should consider having a larger emergency fund. So good information there. Step number 5 is Roth IRA/HSA. These powerful tax-free accounts can supercharge your retirement, which is why they are prioritized before maxing your employer-sponsored account or contributing to a taxable brokerage account. So of course the HSA doesn't apply to everybody because if you don't have a high deductible health plan that qualifies for HSA, then you can't contribute to it. So for some people, they could skip that part. And then there are some people also who can't contribute to a Roth IRA depending on their income or their joint income with their partner. I think this is a good next step. What they're basically saying is max these out after, you've saved your emergency fund, paid off the high interest debt, to max these out. I think one thing I would have liked to see called out here is that while you're building up that emergency fund, it's also okay to invest a little bit. Depending on where you're at, like if you get to 3 months of an emergency fund and you also want to contribute a little bit to your Roth IRA, I think that's fine. It's an approach that I took. When I was working on paying off my debt, I was of course mostly focused on paying down my debt, but I also was building up my emergency fund slowly and then also contributing to retirement. So I feel like you can have a mix of everything, but this is a good step following that emergency fund and following paying that high interest debt, because if you are not paying down that high interest debt, you're probably not gonna make more money in the market. Obviously, we've had a pretty strong market for the last couple of years, So you probably did see much higher returns than some of your high interest debt. But for the most part, it's going to be more beneficial to pay that debt down and then move on to investing. But yeah, if you've taken care of those high interest debts and are still working on your emergency fund, I think it's okay to kind of mix all three. Step number 6, max out employer plans. This includes 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans, and more. This is a very difficult step of the FOO to accomplish because of how much money it takes to maximize your accounts. They do answer the question, can I have too much saved in employer accounts? I like that they've mentioned this in here because in this answer they say, if you are planning to retire early, before you can access your employer accounts, this could create an issue. A taxable brokerage account, which enters the picture at step 7, may be a useful tool for those that require early access to their retirement savings. So I don't think it's a bad thing to max out your 401k or anything like that, especially if you have a very high tax bracket or anything like that and you're contributing to your traditional 401k. You can lower your tax burden. Obviously, it's just going to help you to have more in retirement, and that is very important. This is definitely a hard step for a lot of people. I've never maxed out my 401k. Y'all know I wanted to in 2024, but then I left my job about midway through, so I have never accomplished this aside from my Roth IRA. But it would be so cool. Like getting to this, I think it's a good goal to aim for if it's something that's important to you. For 2025, the max that you can contribute to your 401k is $23,500. And then if you're also maxing out your Roth IRA, that's, a little bit over $30,000. That is amazing. And then of course, if you're over 50, you can contribute more to your retirement plan through your employer and even to your Roth IRA. Or to any IRAs. They answer the question, what if my employer plan has bad investment options? Due to the tax advantage nature of employer accounts, we think it's still a good idea to contribute even if you don't have the best investment options. Keep in mind that your money is not locked in the plan forever. If you leave your employer, you may have the opportunity to roll funds into an IRA or Roth IRA in your new employer's plan, or you can just do that on your own. If you have your Roth IRA separately and you leave your employer and you don't like what you're invested in, you can roll that into your Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, whatever it is, and choose where to invest your money. I think a lot of companies are getting better with their options, and even now you can do like Roth 401k, and that's very good. I'm glad to see that that's been changing. There are still some older companies though that, when I work with clients, oftentimes they'll show me their retirement plan. And I'm like, I have never seen these. Like, I don't even know what these are. And it's just weird options that are often, they have higher expense ratios and pretty low returns. This is kind of going off topic, but my guidance with employer plans is typically look for the funds that have a lower expense ratio. So this is something like 0.05 or 0.06, whatever. And then a larger rate of return over a 10-year period. So the larger that is, the more return that fund has seen. And oftentimes companies at least have access to like a large market cap fund or S&P 500. So just look out for those keywords. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own research and reach out to an advisor if you feel that's necessary. But that's typically the approach that I take and what I prefer to do. Step number 7, they call hyperaccumulation. Invest 25% plus. Depending on your income, hyperaccumulation may happen inside of your employer-sponsored accounts, using the mega backdoor Roth strategy or in a taxable brokerage account. So step number 7 is something that may be able to be achieved in step number 6. Depending on your income, you could already be investing over 25%. Between your Roth IRA, between your retirement plan, you may already have hit that. So that's kind of cool that you can kind of mix the two of them. My thought is the higher the better, of course. If you're able to pay for everything, you feel comfortable with your savings, you feel comfortable with everything financially, then I think if you can do 30-40%, amazing. They answer the question, why should I invest so much for retirement before paying for my kids' college education? We love the analogy of putting your own oxygen mask on before helping your kids if there's an emergency on an airplane. Saving is no different. You need to ensure your financial future is on solid ground before worrying about your children. Yes, I talked about this in the Dave Ramsey video. Ultimately, if you save too little for retirement, your children may bear the responsibility of caring for you. There are no retirement loans or scholarships, but there are many different ways to pay for college. Yes, 100% I agree with this. They put this into a simple paragraph of what I was trying to say in my video reacting to Dave Ramsey's thoughts around paying for college. I agree, y'all. If you can educate your children on finances sooner rather than later, if they take out college loans, that is okay. They'll be able to pay it off. Make sure they put it in their name. Don't put it in your name. They will be fine. They will figure it out. It is better for you to be more prepared for retirement so that they don't have to pay for you once you reach that age. How much should I contribute to a taxable brokerage account? Depending on when you plan to retire, it may be a good idea to have a significant amount saved in a taxable account or nothing at all. Since there are no restrictions on withdrawing assets and no tax penalties for taking money out early, they make ideal vehicles for investing for an early retirement. If you plan for more traditional retirement, you may not need much, if anything, in a taxable account. Yeah, oftentimes I do get asked about brokerage accounts, like who should be investing in those? Is that something that I should be doing? It just depends on what you want out of life. So if you think that you are going to retire at a traditional retirement age, 65 plus, then you're probably fine just sticking to retirement accounts, 401k, Roth IRA, that sort of thing. But if you want to retire anytime sooner than that, or if you feel pretty good about where your retirement accounts are at and how much you're contributing to them, and you want to save some money, maybe some long-term savings that you're going to use in the next 10 to 15 years, opening a brokerage may be good to act as a savings, but for you to make some more money, have some more gains by having that money invested. But just be aware that it is money invested, so you could also lose money. So yeah, it just depends on your situation, but I think brokerage accounts are awesome and you have, much more control with them and more flexibility. Step number 8, prepay future expenses. Okay, so this is where you start saving for your kids' college education. Again, if you don't have children, this is irrelevant, so some people could skip this. This could mean saving in a 529 plan, UGMA/UTMA, custodial accounts, or if they have earned income, custodial Roth IRA. This step is also for any other long-term financial goal you have. Maybe you want a vacation home in Florida, maybe you want to take a month-long trip of your dreams to Europe, or maybe you want to start investing in real estate. They do answer how to save for kids' college and the different options with that. But really what they end with here is that unlike the other steps, this one is kind of unclear because it's going to be different for everybody. They even mentioned that you may not need to save anything on step 8, or you may need to save a lot depending on your financial goals. So really this is just any future expenses. So beyond your emergency fund, beyond the investing, what is it that you want out of life? I love that they have the flexibility around that. And yes, it's, with Dave Ramsey's baby steps, for example, it's clearly outlined and everybody could follow that, for the most part. But personal finance is so personal that there can't be just like these set rules to follow, because it just varies from person to person. It depends on what you want out of life. And then step number 9, prepay low interest debt. It's difficult to say you are truly financially independent as long as you have debt. And step 9 is where you finally get rid of those pesky low interest debts. This typically includes mortgage debt, but may include student loan debt depending on your age. I think it's so interesting that they put this as the last step of everything. And this is where it's important to know what you want out of life. Like if you are trying to find the best path for you to follow, it really depends on what you want. So I know for myself that being completely debt-free was really important. Now, it wasn't super important where I needed to be like super intense with it, and I wasn't going to enjoy life while I was paying off my debt. I also was still investing while I was paying off my debt. But for the most part, I prioritized that, because even if I had lower interest rates, like for example, my student loans, despite them being in forbearance during the pandemic, before that, I think my lowest interest rate was like 3.6 or something, which is very low, So I technically did not need to rush and pay that down, but I love not having payments. That was something that I wanted. I wanted to be completely debt-free and just not have to worry about that. So I definitely put that much earlier in these steps instead of, making it something that I would still be paying on to this day. However, I know that being completely debt-free isn't top priority for a lot of people. Like writing out a 3% interest rate is fine for a lot of people. I know if I had a mortgage in my name, I probably wouldn't be in a huge rush to pay it down. I would probably make a little bit of extra payments so I could save some money on interest in the long term, especially if it wasn't going to be the home that I was going to live in for the rest of my life. I would probably not try to pay that down super fast. So I think step number 9 could be step number 4 for some people, or step number 5. It could be moved around just depending on what it is that you want out of life. Another huge thing that needs to be considered is your age when you're trying to determine if if you want to follow the FOO or any path that, you know, tells you how to handle your money. If you are starting your financial journey, whether that be paying down debt or investing, and you are the age of 25, that's going to look completely different from somebody who's just starting at the age of 50 or 55. If you are starting a little bit later in life, these are things that probably could be moved around. And obviously you also need to take a look at what it is, again, going back to what you want out of life and your lifestyle. If you have children, if you own a home, what your goals are, all of those things. But for the most part, I really do love the financial order of operations. I think this is a decent order. If I were to kind of change things up with their 9 steps, I would honestly put number 2 as number 1. So employer match, if you are able to do that, you're not going into further debt, that type of thing, and you have one, it's vested immediately. And then I would say step 2 would combine step 1 and 4. So deductibles covered and emergency fund is something that could be worked on together. So yes, having your highest deductible covered could count as the emergency fund, a good solid emergency fund for a lot of people, but also you need to consider the stability of your job and your situation. So if you have children, if you own a home, if you have an older car, if you have pets, I do think your emergency fund should be a little bit higher, even beyond those deductibles covered, just depending on what they actually are. Step number 3, high interest debt. I would say that that could stay. For me, it was kind of like just become completely debt free aside from a mortgage if you were to have one. And at the same time, I would say that you could also be investing, you know. So yes, first prioritize that high interest debt, tackle that before, you know, maximizing your Roth IRA or anything like that. But that would soon follow. So once you pay off that high interest debt, you could still be working on paying down debt, even if it's low interest, but then you could also focus on contributing more to your Roth IRA, your HSA, your employer plans, that type of thing. But after that, I feel like everything else I would kind of leave. So max out employer plans, hyper accumulation, those kind of go together. As long as you're maxing out the employer plan, like that is probably going to be 25% or more invested. And then yeah, preparing for future expenses. So children, long-term savings, financial goals, things that you want to achieve in life. I do recommend checking out this article though, or even just listening to their podcast where they talk about this. A lot of the stuff that they talk about is on repeat, you know, because finance is very simple at the end of the day. It may not be easy, but it is just the same thing over and over again. But definitely check out this article. There's a lot of good information and many questions that they answer in here, so may be helpful depending on what you're looking for. But those are my thoughts on the financial order of operations by the Money Guy. Let me know what y'all think of this, or if this is something that you follow, if there's anything that you would change with this, I would love to hear it. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.